apologize for the temp. So usually I would make a joke about 9 elected officials and hot air, but it is the air conditioning this time. That's out. So, all right. Ordinances under, let me get the minute approval, please. We've skipped a week and I'm totally falling apart. Thank you. Do I have a second? All right. Motions, minutes will stand as motioned. Ordinances on final reading under finance. Item A, Madam Clerk, we have already read this into the record on first read. Do we have any questions from council on item A? Very good. Moving on to ordinances into first reading under finance. Mr. Goldberg, will you come and explain to us one more time to make sure that we have this clear? And I have had some council members reach out to me with questions, that this does not eliminate the senior tax freeze program and that we still have the program intact with United Way.
Correct.
Okay.
So several years ago, the city code was updated in the wastewater section to have the senior program for wastewater fees, which is not allowed by state law. So the regular senior tax assistance programs that are allowed by the state, so the senior tax freeze program, for example, those will continue with no changes at all. And then in addition to that, the wastewater assistance that we provide as a city will continue as it has been, no changes. So this is simply a matter of cleaning up the city code for what's allowed by state law. We don't waive water quality or stormwater fees currently in practice anyway. If someone qualifies for assistance, we send them to United Way, where they go through the application process, and then United Way sends us money to pay for the fees because they're not allowed to be waived.
Very good. I want to make sure that was clear for the record.
So practically, there's no changes to the way we've done it for several years.
Okay.
We're just cleaning up language in the code.
Very good. I will hold just for a second to see if any questions come on this item before you leave. And I believe we are good to go. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Under planning, we have items on first read this evening. Does anyone have any items that requires a special note? If you would hit your light. Councilwoman Hill, I see your light.
Thank you, Chairman. Item C, we have an amendment that we need to add. It's a condition to make, here, let me read the exact language. There's a new site plan entitled Phase 14 Lift Conditions Updated Exhibit that needs to be attached to this new ordinance. It's going to ensure the enforceability of the site plan, which was something that Councilman Henderson was concerned about with this.
Okay, we are referring to case 0138, correct?
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
item C.
Just want to make sure. So are we going to look for an amendment at 6 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay, make a note of that. Thank you.
Will Mr. Henderson be here at 6?
Councilman Henderson did indicate he will be here at 6 p.m.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Then
ma'am.
I would imagine he'll bring that
Yeah,
to the
thank you.
body.
Councilwoman Knoll, I see your.
Item M and N, intending to make a motion to defer
Be for
Be-
one
for
week.
1 week
1 week.
until, what would that be, the 19th?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
Very good. We'll look for that at 6 o'clock. Seeing no other lights in District 4, I will be stepping aside from the chair to handle a few cases in District 4 that have some improvements. And the Madam Vice Chair has graciously accepted to take over in my absence during those cases. All right, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Moving on to resolutions. We do have a resolution on item A. I have, that is in District 4. My park appointee has reached out to me and did have to resign, and this is the new appointee. So moving under human resources, items D and E, any questions regarding the appointments? Seeing none. Under planning, I think we have a couple of items here. We have a SEP, and then we have 2 PUDs. Those are in District 4 with a special exceptions permit in District 1. If someone will take note of that, that is a special exceptions permit for a liquor store in District 1. if you can read my request there. Let's switch over to purchases, please. Take a look at those. We have quite a few with being off for a week. And I believe we have 2 RFPs. Dan or Karen, while we're waiting for any questions on purchases, do you have anything you need to add to the RFPs that would help us in identifying moving forward with land use plans? And also, can you talk while you're here real quick just about the Area 11 plan that was passed at Planning Commission yesterday?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Area 11 was passed by the Planning Commission yesterday, and that's a plan that's been underway for about 2 years. I think it's had lots of stakeholder engagement, a good process that then led to a lot of projects and needs identified in Area 11. And so we will have a presentation for you in the coming month of the details of that Area 11 plan. And I would also say that one of the specifics related to the existing area plans we have is that we now have staff that are trying to work cooperatively with our departments and with the community and our council members to try to implement our plans and be very deliberate about Area 3, Area 11, and Area 12. At the same time, we are going to be embarking over the next year on sort of for unincorporated Hamilton County, on behalf of the RPA, we will undertake we will do an RFP to hire consultants that will help us undertake planning across the unincorporated area. We will look at scenarios and projections for growth and look at land use plans, but we will also try to very specifically look at what that means in terms of our sewer needs, what that means in terms of potential for new students in our schools and traffic. And then at the same time, we will have a different consultant group that will help us updating our plans in the city of Chattanooga. We have a lot of great plans that have been undertaken over the last 2 decades, but many of the areas in the city are in need of sort of, I just call modernizing our thinking and our planning. And so we will be doing the same thing here in the city of Chattanooga over the next 12 to 18 months.
Very good. Thank
It's
you.
very exciting. And we look forward to bringing that back to you when we have RFPs and consultants selected and all those things.
Great. Thanks for that update. Councilwoman Hill, I did see your light. You want to?
Sure. So I had a couple of questions and I had not gotten answers to them, and I just checked my email again and did have answers, but I did want to elevate something for the council. The items that I had questions on, we have a $5.5 million purchase request for a contract with 3 different electrical groups. This is a Waste Resources Division electrical services citywide. This is from the Interceptor Sewer Operations Fund. And my question to Brent was, when we were in the budget process last year, the expense of outside electrical contractors was one of the things that was brought to us as rationale for why we needed to fix our pay plan. And so I wanted to find out from him, what can we expect next year, given that this is the final renewal? Can we expect that this will go down? It sounds like they've had a harder time than expected hiring people, but I know that for me, that's going to be something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. The other thing that I asked about was the Signal Centers camps. I asked several questions about that, but one thing that the body may be interested to know is that you are required to be a resident of the city of Chattanooga to participate in those camps. One final thing, and it may not matter at all, but for the record, the item, I wish these were numbered, but it's purchase 200296. The narrative on that is incorrect. It refers to Custom Custodial, but it's actually related to Current Technologies, Inc. So that may be something we need to fix for the record.
I'm assuming administration's noted that. I see a head nod. Okay.
Cool. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for those answers, Brent. I appreciate them. You're like, and on 2 wheels.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hill. While we're in future considerations, Dr. Burrs, can you help us out with a plan to identify how we're going to address gaining information on the administration's proposal for ARP? You'll hit your light for me, ma'am.
Yeah.
There you go.
So Joda, I received a lot of questions relative to budget and how we handle. There's a lot to look at here relative to allocating $30 million to agencies and the questions, to different groups. And they've been this thing we always say, and that is, what are they going to do and how are they going to be accountable for it? And the fact that I also agree with, I'm not voting to appropriate any amount of money that are taxpayer dollars to any group unless I know what they're going to do and what purpose it serves and how they're going to be held accountable. So I met with Joda and pretty much said that, unless it gets fixed, I know I can't support it and I can't speak for some of my colleagues, but I can tell you that they've had the same questions. And to that, Joda responded.
Yes. So first off, thank you for those comments. It is something that we've communicated to every single one of the recommended agencies and organizations that the final step on this approval process, which has been, or this American Rescue Plan allocation process, is City Council approval. And that is why we would like to take the process very similar to the budget process, which we believe was very successful and helping this council understand and feel comfortable with the allocations and decisions they were making on the budget. So while this is currently on future considerations, and that would imply that we're on a 3-week track for approving this, I think it makes the most sense, and this administration thinks it makes the most sense, to only vote whenever the council is ready to vote. So we will proceed with a set of meetings with the individual committee heads where we will review the relevant projects underneath that committee and brief you all on those items. And then we will have, and I'm asking the chair to schedule time for a education session on the 19th. And if we need a further education session, we are happy to do that. And then once the council is ready to vote is when we would we're certainly in no rush, and we want to make sure everybody feels comfortable with the plan. I will say this administration is very proud of the plan. We feel that there is some real generational changing investments in this package, and we would love to make sure that council feels as prideful as we do about how we got here and what we're investing in. So I just wanted to communicate from the administration that we will take the time necessary to make sure that each of you feel comfortable with the investments that have been recommended to this body for approval.
Okay, so in essence, what we've come up with is we're going to handle the allocation of these funds exactly the same process as we did with the budget. You were fully informed. It was totally transparent. There's no reason why we can't have however the education sessions you want, whether they be at strategic planning or whether they be public education sessions. For the first session, we thought that we wouldn't change the timeline since it's just next week. However, I'll be asking, as I did before, do you need further education? Do you need more time? Which you did before, and rightfully so. I did too. So it may be, and the administration is prepared to go to a second session should need be, allotting, and it's up to the chair and each of you to allot additional time if you need that. And then I will be asking the same question I did. I will be asking the experts in the area, whether it be economic development or community or public safety or whatever. Every one of these allocations falls naturally under a committee. What else do you need? So the council will be fully informed. And then I will be saying, are you ready to vote? And ready to vote means, are you ready to go forward? And if you're not, then we'll work on it until you are. We seem to have no problem last time with this, and it ought to work well again. It's a lot of money. There are a lot of, it's interesting stuff. And I think the main question that's come from many of you is, well, okay, I see this organization is getting money, for world peace. How are they going to get there? And how are we going to evaluate it? Absence of war probably isn't the only thing we're going to evaluate. So, all kidding aside, let's be businesslike about it. So if you guys are okay with that, that's what we're going to do. If there's anybody not okay, be happy to address that.
So Dr. Burrs, the proposal that we've worked out is to start an education session next Tuesday on the 19th at our 2:00 strategic planning
Yes,
session.
sir.
And then if we need additional time,
Yes,
then we
sir.
will move that on over to the 26th
Yes,
and
sir.
start again.
That's right.
And does that work for the administration?
It does.
Does council have any objections to that plan of action? Okay, very good. And let's make that, as they say on Star Trek, let's make it so.
Yep. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Dr.
Chair.
Burrs, thank you for your input on that. Any other comments on future considerations? I think a bulk of those are the ARP distribution, so we'll cover those in the next session or two. We do not have any department reports this evening. I do have a note, Madam Clerk, I believe we need an attorney-client on the 19th, if you'll put that into the record, please. And we will have Parks and Public Works and Economic Development. Any other comments or concerns for the council before we adjourn into committee? Absolutely, Dr. Burrs.
Lee, I missed when you switched over to future considerations on the agenda. I
apologize. I believe I did skip over July 19th because I was so
Oh, it's
excited
not
to
a-
hear about the education session.
Okay, no problem. You have under finance at the very end, a resolution to amend resolution blah, blah for the grant. And Brent, this is really good. I like it. I think that if you'll read it carefully, a resolution authorizing administrators and directors of the city of Chattanooga to apply for and if awarded, accept grants under 25,000. They should be able to do that. And to accept grants under 50,000, and this is what I like, only if they do not require matching funds and do not place operational obligations on the city or become contract obligations. That's a really good idea because it allows people to apply for and accept monies that really don't need our approval.
Right.
Okay. I didn't know if anyone had any questions about that, but Brent, I really like that. That was your idea? God, what can I tell you? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
That's it, sir.
Dr. Burrs.
Thank
And
you.
in addition, that item also, it walks hand in hand, Brent, with the other item, raising the threshold, correct? Okay. Okay, if there's no other questions about our July 19th agenda, we will now move into Parks and Public Works with Chairman Hester. I don't want to move. Get some-
Thank you, Chair. Welcome to Parks and Public Works Committee. Can we approve the minutes? Okay. Madam Clerk, we're going to get you off the hook for final readings. Ordinance for final reading, we're not going to read those. Can we read 6 on first reading, please?
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 26, Section 2623, rental rates for municipal parks, all other municipal parks, subsections C1A, venue rates for Greenway Farm Park and Conference Center.
I see no hands. 7I, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Parks and Outdoors to apply for and if awarded, accept a grant award of $25,000 from the Void Foundation for the improvement of the dog park amenities at Greenway Farm.
No hands. J, please.
A resolution to amend resolution number 31112 to reflect the contract term authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to execute contract number S21009101 with CTI Engineers, Inc. for landfill deficiency recommendation and repairs to the linear leachate and gas collection systems at the city and Summit landfills for year 1 of 4 in the amount of $420,000.
I see no hands. Thank you. That's the hottest minutes at City Hall. We're gonna have Economic Development Committee next. Thank you.
Okay, can we get approval of the minutes? Karen, if you will read ordinance on first read.
An ordinance amending Chattanooga City Code Part 2, Chapter 9, Division 1, Section 92, 94, 95, and 96, relative to the Public Art Commission.
Resolutions, 7B.
A resolution considering short-term vacation rental application number 22 STVR 123 for property located at 705 North Holly Street.
C, please.
A resolution amending resolution number 31078 to confirm the surplus of the property located at 2514 East 17th Street, identified as tax map number 156FB017, and to amend the donation agreement to allow for the closing to occur on or before August 31st, 2022.
Thank you. And if you read next week, resolution A.
A resolution approving the economic impact plan for the North River Commerce Center Industrial Park tax increment financing development area, subject to certain conditions.
Oh, now, here go Hester. Got a question from Hester? Councilman Hester. Oh, Lefford, is that you, oh, Lefford?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, if you don't mind, going back to item B, the short-term vacation rental. Jermaine, can you confirm that was prior to the moratorium being placed?
It was prior.
Okay.
Yeah, I can get Caleb to tell us the exact date, but I want to say it was 1 to 2 days before the moratorium.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Karen? 7B, are we on B?
A resolution authorizing the mayor or his designee to award up to $40,000 to Habitat for Humanity of Greater Chattanooga area to construct a house at 227 Canary Circle for affordable housing ownership.
7C.
A resolution authorizing the mayor or his designee to award up to $40,000 to Habitat for Humanity of Greater Chattanooga area to construct a house at 3420 Kirkland Avenue for affordable home ownership.
Thank you. Jermaine, you ready to give us a review of the TIF?
Yes, good afternoon, members of the council and Chairwoman Coonrod. Today, we're going to be talking about 2 TIFs. The first, you all are pretty familiar with, and that this is involving the North River Commerce Center, which is being applied for by Access Road LLC. After that, I'll go into a TIF arrangement that we are looking to explore for the construction of a multi-use stadium over on the South Broad site. But for the time being, I'll go ahead and start with the North River Commerce Center. As I mentioned, you all are already familiar with this. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll wait. Okay. As I mentioned, you all are already familiar with this project as it's already come before City Council, as well as the Industrial Development Board. But we have Access Road LLC, which is proposing a $102 million total investment for a TIF district that's being created along North Access Road. The proposed TIF would be for $8.7 million. With capitalized interest not to exceed $9.9 million. And it would create 800,000 square feet of Class A industrial space, on underutilized property around the former DuPont site. It has the potential to create up to 600 direct full-time jobs. Those 800,000 square feet would compose and comprise 4 independent Class A industrial space buildings. And then there would be improvements to North Access Road and existing sanitary sewer and stormwater infrastructure. This is a map of the TIF district. As you all will recall, there was a request to make sure that the parcel that is part of DuPont Park, where the North River soccer fields are held, that parcel would be held out. So that parcel is not included in the TIF district. These are the parcels that Access Road LLC would be taking down as part of this arrangement. So these are the parcels of which they have the option to purchase. The parcel that abuts the river is the parcel in which they would donate property that could be used for an easement to create a future greenway, which of course we would like to call the North Chick Greenway. So at this point, just to sort of take you through the application process, and this TIF is following a normal and traditional application process. The developer has already submitted their application to the IDB. That application has been reviewed. The IDB has passed its resolutions of intent, and the City Council has passed its resolution of intent, saying that none of the improvements that they plan to make were part of our capital improvements plans. The economic impact plan has been submitted to the IDB. And then we held an application review committee meeting in the Collins Conference Room in early June. We then scheduled our public hearing before the Industrial Development Board on June the 27th. And then the minutes from the public hearing have been attached as supporting documentation for this item. So at this point, today we have our committee presentation. Tomorrow there will be a committee presentation for the County Commission. And then next week we would be looking at a vote by both the City Council and the County Commission. If approved by both bodies, the final vote for the development and financing agreement would occur before the Industrial Development Board on August the 1st. So this is a picture of, or a mock-up of what one of the buildings could look like as part of the North River Commerce Center. And this is a little bit about the site. So the parcels that Access Road is proposing to take down compose about 88 acres. They are all zoned M1, and there is rail access and good access to highways and interstates. The developers are here today. So I think we have Matt and Jeff that are here, along with their counsel, Mark Smith from Miller & Martin. And then, of course, Charles Wood from the Chambers here, who could speak to, if we need him to, the real need to develop more Class A industrial space in Chattanooga. Obviously, we believe that we are falling behind our peer cities like Greenville and Huntsville in terms of Class A industrial space and making that space available. And that is why we as an administration support the project and support the development of more Class A industrial space. This is sort of a mock-up of the site, including the parcels that would be taken down by Access Road LLC and where the buildings would be potentially constructed. This, of course, today is what the parking lot looks like in front of the Cordza facility. Cordza, of course, occupies what used to be DuPont. That facility used to employ several thousand people, at least 5,000 in its heyday. And these parking lots, of course, used to be full for multiple shifts during the day. Nowadays, Cordza employs less than 500 people at this site. So, of course, you don't have nearly as much traffic or nearly as much need for parking as you did back then. Hence why Access Road LLC is really looking closely at the redevelopment of these parcels for a higher and better use. This is another picture of the parking lots from the vantage point of North Access Road behind you. And these are the vacant and abandoned athletic fields, baseball fields that were once part of the DuPont site. So what we're looking at is a proposed $102 million investment. The total site work and infrastructure that will need to be put in will be closer to $23.5 million. However, again, the applicants are applying for an $8.7 million TIF with capitalized interest not to exceed $9.9 million. There is a small road that leads off of North Access Road that goes into the site past DuPont Park, and that leads to the soccer fields. As part of the site improvements, the applicant would slightly realign that road so that it comes out to a full traffic signal, providing better access and better egress and ingress for people who are using the soccer field as well as the Sinks Disc Golf Course. And of course, there would be improvements to Access Road, including the turn lanes and the acceleration lanes that are described, as well as many linear feet of stormwater pipe and overhead telephone and fiber that needs to be either relocated or demolished. This is an overall view of the site plan for the North Access Road Commerce Center. So the 4 buildings there with their square footage are the buildings that would be built as part of this proposed TIF project. So where it says 200, 300, 100, 400, those are the approximate sizes of the square footage for each building. And so this is where, this is how, what the site would look like. And then if you see the parcel D where it says future development, that is the parcel where the applicant is proposing to also make property available for greenway access across that parcel, which abuts the Tennessee River. This, of course, is what a Class A industrial space sort of looks like, again, from the mock-up. And so this, again, is just a summary of the TIF itself, which is $8.7 million. We believe that the site has the potential to create 600 direct jobs, not including 700 construction jobs. The TIF would be for a 20-year term, and the developer is committed and has been working with the City of Chattanooga and the Trust for Public Land on the design of the Greenway. There are still some things that are still sort of related and hanging out there related to the Greenway. So, for example, the property right next to the property that Access Road is preparing to purchase is owned by Corza. So we are still in the process of trying to work with Corza to see if we could also get access to one of their parcels for the full construction of the Greenway. And that, of course, will take time and negotiations, but we have reached out to them, and so those conversations will be ongoing. This, of course, is what we sort of see post-development once we have tax revenue coming in. Obviously, you don't have a lot of tax revenue that is coming in today because these sites are either surface parking lots, or in the case of the parcel on the other side of North Access Road, it's never been developed, it's just trees. So you see a significant increase in property taxes that both come into the city and go to the county to support the schools. And so that is the contact information for our friends over with Access Road LLC. Again, they are here today in the audience. I'll invite Matt to come up to introduce himself once again, and then he and I will both be available along with Charles Wood to answer any questions. Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Jermaine. Good afternoon, Council. My name is Matt Phillips, President of Access Road LLC and Rise Partners. Jermaine went into great detail about our project. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know this is I guess the second time we've been in front of Council on this project. So given that the air conditioner is not working, I'll let you guys ask any questions you may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt, I have no questions for you. Just a great big thank you for sticking with this and helping to make this project work. My questions first are for Jermaine, please.
Okay. Yes, sir, Councilman.
One slide back.
Okay.
All right, so this is the piece that we all talk about. This is the piece that you hear out in the public when you start talking about TIFs and pilots and everything else.
That's right.
So I'm seeing Pre and post development. Pre makes total sense. Post development can mean a couple of different things. Is this post development or is this post TIF payback?
This is post development, not post TIF payback.
So to be clear, the amount
Yes.
we're seeing on here, when will the city expect to receive $322,000 of annual tax revenue?
Let me. I'm sorry. So that number is at full build out, but the city will begin to expect increment, and the county will expect increment over the entire term. And so just remember, the way that a TIF is structured under the TIF policy, the city does not forego revenue for the entire TIF term. The city will continue to collect 40% off of every dollar that would normally come to the city. And then the county would also collect its revenue, and a portion of that would go to the general debt service of the Hamilton County government, as well as the schools. So we expect full build out to be 2024. In 2024, roughly 2 years from now. So that is when that number would come in.
Okay. So those are really, really important details. I know we discussed them early on when we first started talking about this project. And I think it's probably even more important, the 40%, Jermaine, than anything else on this slide.
Yes, sir.
Because a lot of people do not understand. They think that we are cutting them a check. We think that we're foregoing all taxes. The fact of the matter is, we're not only not foregoing taxes, we're leaving them the way they are and adding to them as we go. They are not frozen. They will continue to increment. So this project does not forego taxes completely. We actually will start generating revenue on dead property pretty much as soon as the shovel hits the dirt. And then in 2 years, 3 years, let's just say 3 years, depending on whether or not you can get materials to build, we're looking at a substantial, almost a 10-time increment in that amount of time of revenue that the city itself, not just the schools and the county, but the city itself will be able to start receiving on this property.
Yes. Thank you for explaining that. That is lost on a lot of people. The fact that the city and county actually do make money during a TIF, money that would not have been there had the TIF not been done and the project not taken place.
Right. That is probably the most important thing on this for us to be able to explain as well. This is the whole reason TIFs exist, in my opinion. They've been used incorrectly and not to the benefit of the taxpayers in the past. This is exactly the reason to have this tool and to help people such as Mr. Phillips and his partners and the chamber when they're doing economic development for our community. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairwoman. As the other council person who has the benefit of having this in my district, I'm very pleased with the way that this project has come together. I'm glad that we have this opportunity to reintroduce industrial, clean industrial into a space that was made for that, in fact. Please talk to us about the bond plan for the bond as an insurance bond for this, because I see TIFs are much lower risk for the taxpayer because we are not taking on any debt. However, RISE Partners will begin tearing into infrastructure. So what are the bond requirements within this agreement for RISE Partners?
So the specific performance bonds that will be negotiated will actually go before the IDB. Those are not yet spelled out in the economic impact plan, and they usually aren't. Those documents are typically negotiated directly between RISE as the applicant and the Department of Public Works in terms of the infrastructure that they have to tear up, because Public Works is obviously much more familiar with that process than we are. But all of those documents get negotiated and will come before the Industrial Development Board for final approval, and the TIF will not go into effect until those documents have been finalized. And so they will work, and I think every contractor or construction company or developer that tears into city infrastructure is required to take on bonds. And Matt could probably talk a little bit more about that as well as Ben, but they will be required to do that just like any other developer who is doing work on city infrastructure.
District 2 in particular, a very small neighborhood in District 2, Lupton City, has been negatively impacted by poor performers in terms of developers twice now in recent history. They are still suffering the environmental consequences of the city not requiring a bond for a project to be torn down. And then in the midst of that cleanup, there was a dispute and work stopped for months and months and months and months. And only July 6th has actually resumed. So this bond plan, Matt, is very important to me. We've got to know that our citizens are protected, that we are not setting ourselves up for a wasteland of torn up asphalt all along DuPont Park or Access Road. I have full confidence that that will not happen, but it's my job to mitigate risk for folks. So please do let the IDB board know that that's super important.
Councilwoman Hill, we hear you loud and clear, and as it is my goal to eventually come back to you with more TIFs, we will make sure not to disappoint you.
I appreciate that. All in all, I'm very pleased with this project and I'm eager for it to get started. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jermaine. Appreciate it. So we're adjourned until 6.
I think we
got
have one more
more
presentation
pre-
unrelated to
oh,
this project, but
okay.
related to a stadium over in the south side.
Okay, Councilman.
Hey, hang on one second.
I just wanted to, I just real quickly, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate your consideration and look forward to next week. Thank you so much.
Matt, Madam Chair, I want to say thank you as well. And I also want to say thank you to my colleague, Councilman Smith, for explaining a little bit more in depth about how TIFs actually work, because it's all too often, it seems these days, depending on what position you are on something, you will get a different definition of what a TIF is.
Sure.
And misinformation is something that we absolutely are combating on a daily basis. So
Sure.
I applaud you for taking a strong stance and actually putting out accurate information on how important these tools are and how they actually work, instead of how people think they might work or how they may work to your advantage, depending on a certain position on the whole idea. So this is a good project.
Thank you
And,
so much.
And I hope that we do actually see more of those similar to this. So thank you.
Thank you.
As a final note to that project, just to put a button on it, I really want to say thank you to both Councilwoman Hill and Councilman Smith. We came to them and basically said, here's what we have. Tell us what you want and what you don't want. And they gave it to us straight, and we appreciate that. Thank you for letting us know what you wanted. All right, so let's talk about South Broad. Obviously, all of you have heard recently about the announcements along the South Broad site. We believe in the administration that this is the next really big phase for Chattanooga, and that there come times in the development of a city where we have the ability and the opportunity to do some really big things for our city. This is an opportunity for us to do that. This is an opportunity for us to take Chattanooga into the next phase of development. And this is an opportunity for us to really do some things that will help our city to shine and be recognized for many years to come. What you are looking at today is an overview of the Whelen Foundry U.S. pipe site as it currently exists. So this is how it has existed for many, many years. I am 43 years old. Sometimes I hate to admit how old I am at times, but for most of my life, I have looked at this site and driven by this site, and this is exactly what it has looked like for most of certainly all of my adulthood, and for many of my formidable years. So going back a few years, the previous administration worked closely with Mayor Coppinger to begin the study of a plan that could reimagine what that site could look like. Not only the U.S. Pipe Whelen Foundry site, which is approximately 140 acres, but also what the site could look like as part of a broader revitalization and study area. And so some of you who were on the council back in 2018, you will remember that the Chattanooga Design Studio initiated a study of the South Broad District, and that study included a large portion of the South Side called Southside Gardens. This was the focus area of that study, which was started in 2017. Planning was started in 2016, and the study was eventually completed in 2018. The South Broad District study basically focused on this area that you see here. This includes Southside Gardens and then a little land to the west of I-24. But for the most part, this area is bounded by I-24 and Chattanooga Creek. It obviously includes much of South Broad Street and spans all the way over to Howard High School, and basically includes all of the properties between Howard High School and the U.S. Pipe Wheel and Foundry site. This was the illustrative plan that was adopted as part of the master plan when it was finished. If you notice, if you look up to your left of the screen, you will see what looks like a baseball field, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But that was one of the recommendations that came from the plan. So the South Broad plan made many recommendations, though, not just about baseball. It also talked about the adaptive reuse of some of the foundry buildings. It talked about a mixture of uses, both horizontally and vertically. And it did talk about the need to relocate a baseball stadium to use as an anchor tenant on the U.S. Pipe Wheel and Foundry site to serve as a catalyst for future economic development. This slide is taken directly from the pages of the study itself. You'll see that recommendation number 4 under the implementation plan talks directly about the creation of a TIF district. Recommendation number 5 talks about the need to promote affordability. Recommendation 6 talks about the Howard School. And recommendation 7 talks about the need to pursue catalytic projects by focusing specifically on the U.S. Pipe Wheel and Foundry site. If you scroll to the next page of the study, it talks very specifically and explicitly about the need to maybe put a minor league baseball stadium on the site to serve as a catalyst for future economic development. So the planning for what could happen on the U.S. Pipe Wheel and Foundry site has been planning that has been going on for a number of years. This was a very intensive community engagement process. I actually had the privilege of serving as a facilitator for breakout groups during this process, so I remember it well. There were over 200 people that attended meetings for this, and there were dozens and dozens of meetings, many of which were held down at Calvary Chapel over on South Broad Street. The South Broad District Plan was adopted by the City Council in 2018, which you can see here. And so it was adopted by resolution and also recommended by the Regional Planning Agency. And so in recent weeks and months, we have began, obviously as part of our outreach to the community and working with Councilwoman Dotley's urging, making sure that we were talking with the community to restart what those conversations would look like around reinvesting and following the South Broad master plan and implementing it for the South Chattanooga community. So we held an in-person meeting with some local faith leaders from the Southside Gardens community. We also met virtually on Juneteenth with the South Chattanooga Neighborhood Association, which I think Councilwoman Dotley would tell you now represents both the Southside Gardens community as well as Alton Park. And in both meetings, there was concern from both groups about Alton Park being left out of development. Obviously, those concerns are very sensitive to us because of the long history of disinvestment in Alton Park, as well as some of the environmental challenges that we've seen in Alton Park. So some additional perspectives that we heard from the neighborhood and from faith leaders in the area. We talked about the need to remove blight in urban communities. It talked about the need to make sure that we weren't having some of the flooding issues that you just mentioned, Councilwoman Hill, and parts of your district. And then it also talked about the need really for environmental justice and pursuing more environmental remediation needed in urban neighborhoods. But by and large, the conversations that we began having were conversations that were positive, in which constituents felt like the U.S. Pipe and Wheel and Foundry site could be a catalyst for the community, and that development there was long overdue. Last week, we had the privilege of starting to move the ball forward on the environmental remediation. Deputy Administrator Janet McCabe from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency was with us last week to make an award for $4.9 million to the city, which can be used for environmental remediation. So we have the potential, although that money is not necessarily tied to the U.S. Pipe, Wheel, and Foundry site, there is a distinct possibility that we could use some of these funds for environmental remediation that will be needed there. Some of the additional community perspectives that we heard from the neighborhood were concerns about increased traffic along Broad Street and whether or not that traffic would be offset by development of Chestnut Street. A desire to see us collaborate with Howard High School's Future Ready Institute for Architecture and Construction. People felt like if there was going to be a lot of new development and a stadium built, then the Future Ready Institute should certainly be able to take advantage of that, and that there should be a partnership between the developers to collaborate with the high school to give students the opportunity to participate. There was also a desire to see both the preservation of affordable housing, but also some mixed income housing as well as diversity of incomes. And then people were also concerned about making sure that there were opportunities for minority contractor and DBE participation in construction contracts. So as a result of that, what we did was we decided to create a TIF district that was both reflective of what we saw and read in the South Broad Master Plan, but also a TIF district that could speak to the needs to connect Chattanooga. So what we did was we created a one Chattanooga sort of South Side TIF district that would connect Southside Gardens, South Broad, and Alton Park. If you look at the long skinny line at the bottom, that long blue line, that parcel is a parcel that is owned by the city of Chattanooga. It is specifically reserved for the Alton Park connector. And so that connector, which a picture of which you see here, is a connector that would provide connections straight to the Southside Community Park in Alton Park here. And so we wanted to be responsive to the concerns that we heard from the community as we begin to roll this out. And so as we move forward with creating a TIF district around the site, and that we fully intend to do that as Mayor Kelly has announced, the full funding of the Alton Park connector will be a project that has to be funded through the TIF. This, of course, is Southside Community Park, which lies right off Central Avenue and 38th Street in Alton Park. Obviously, I can't TIF the whole city, so I can't make the TIF go down to Alton Park, but we wanted to make sure that we could provide a connection via the Alton Park connector. And we believe that that is essential because we believe in the power of creating great spaces for our constituents. Miller Park, the extension of ML King Boulevard, the plaza in front of Walnut Street Bridge, the Tennessee Aquarium. These are all great spaces that have helped define Chattanooga and become signature spaces for Chattanoogans and for visitors alike. These are some of the spaces that provide better connectivity, they provide better activation, they provide better outdoor experiences for people to run, walk, and to ride bikes. And we believe that when you look at the investment that's been made in the extension of the Riverwalk through the Wheel and Foundry and South Broad site, that the addition of a multi-purpose stadium on that site with an additional connection to Alton Park would be extremely powerful and an extremely wonderful addition to Chattanooga's continued story of adaptive reuse and evolution. And so this is what we saw when we visited Columbia, South Carolina earlier this year and saw some of the things that they were doing on a site that's very similar to the U.S. Pipe, Wheel, and Foundry site. So in Columbia's a decent town, but it's not as great as Chattanooga. In Columbia, though, they had a site that was approximately the same size. It's about 130 acres. It was completely underutilized. And I think they had an abandoned or a vacant mental health facility that was on the site. So this is a picture of Segra Park, which is located in Columbia's Bull District. And we really begin to see how the use of this ball field could be an anchor for more catalytic development. So we saw people living there because of new apartment buildings that had been built. Working there, Capgemini decided to open up a brand new corporate office overlooking the ball field. and then of course playing. And then you can see the apartment building in the background behind Segra Park. So this is a multi-use venue in Columbia. This venue actually does provide for two sports. It provides for baseball and football. And then of course they also have festivals, concerts, and all types of other events that happen on the site. So being able to create an environment where people could live, work, and play is what we really wanted to do in terms of reimagining the Wheel and Foundry US Pipe site. This is all of the additional development that is happening around the Columbia Stadium. So at this point, Mayor Steve Benjamin, the former mayor of Columbia, who negotiated the new stadium, there is $650 million of investment planned and in the pipeline. And so this was a good thing to see in terms of new office buildings, new hotels, new apartment buildings, new residences, and more parking. So we believe that the stadium could be a catalyst for a reimagined South Broad district to provide new housing, new jobs, entertainment, and that the presence of a minor league baseball stadium with the Lookouts as a tenant could be the potential linchpin to unlock the rest of the investment. This is, I'm going to ask Charles Wood to come up to talk a little bit about this, but this is sort of some stadium projects done across the country since 2002. This information was captured in a study commissioned by the Chamber with CSL, and so I'll ask Charles to come up and say a few words here.
Hi, good afternoon. This slide really is kind of a historical look back over the last 20 years at different minor league baseball stadiums that have been constructed across the country. One of kind of the big notes here, of course, on the right-hand side. So 19 stadiums constructed, 8 of those were publicly funded 100%. 80% of, stadiums that had at least 80% or more of public funding represent 14 of the 19. So pretty significant level of public sector support across the country for these projects. Only one was built without public funding. And so you see that second, if I'm getting my numbers right, second 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom. And that was funded by a private philanthropist. So it was not funded by the team, interestingly enough. So it was, again, a private philanthropist that supported the project basically for the same reason we're looking at trying to work through a TIF project here. And I skipped one. And then I'll talk briefly about the economic impact that CSL identified as part of this project. A couple things here. So the first is this is new impact, which I think is really important. And so from a city standpoint, direct spending as part of the new project is expected to total roughly $185 million with a total economic impact. So that goes beyond just like what the direct spending is that happens on the project of a little over $300 million. And the numbers you see are slightly different depending on whether you're in the city, the county, or the state. And just to give you a little bit of an understanding there, the state numbers are smaller in part because you probably have people that would have spent money somewhere else in the state. So let's say they're in Bradley County, but because of this, they end up in Chattanooga. And so that money is still money they would have spent somewhere else for the state perspective, but from a city of Chattanooga perspective, that's new funding. And so I will tell you the main component and the main purpose for the CSL study was really to have an understanding of the sales tax impact for the state. And while we did not include this for the presentation here for the council, that the full document is available on southbroad.info. So that's up on the site. But the sales tax revenue and having that information for the state delegation was really important for them as they work through legislation that they passed last session, basically dedicating new sales tax from inside the stadium that can be used to pay down debt for the stadium. And so that really, their support and their willingness really to pledge that future sales tax was a big part of kind of starting, I think, the wheels in motion to really start to build momentum around the project. And I'm happy to take some questions on the CSL study, but again, that's the full 54 pages is available on southbroad.info.
Thanks, Charles. So
Councilman Henderson.
Slide back up about that new impact,
This one.
that one. Over what period is this?
So this is throughout the 30-year period of the project. So this is a 30-year window. And this is only pertaining, as far as the job numbers, I think those job numbers are only pertaining kind of stadium timeframe.
So the stadium, you're saying that the jobs that's indicated here are only coming from the stadium?
Correct.
So what, explain why they're different in the city and the county.
So some are going to be, so those are both direct and indirect. So some of those are going to be construction jobs that are going to be created. And so you'll have some job impact that's indirect jobs that are being created outside of the city, if that makes sense. So you could have, they could be spending funds with a contractor that operates outside of the city that's doing work for them.
So these won't be ongoing jobs. Some of these will be,
Correct. Yeah, some could be, some will be construction, some will be ongoing.
some
That's
will go
Yes, sir.
away because of attrition.
correct. Construction project finishes.
Okay.
And I would just,
So we
Ju-
don't know what the actual impact, the permanent impact for those jobs will be.
I can pull the direct job numbers that they have included that's just associated with the stadium. I do want to leave one last comment just to make sure information is clear. That is only talking about the stadium from that perspective. So certainly as development expands onto the rest of the site, that is a different story. And CSL was,
Okay. Let me put you back.
So Charles, we've heard a lot about, go back to the. New.
yeah,
We've heard a lot of discussion about, is this new money or is this money transferred from
right.
a different portion of town? How do we know this is new and not transferred?
Yeah, so this data on this slide is new impact. And the reason it's new impact primarily is because you're building a stadium, right? So there's new construction impact that happens with that.
Basically, this is just the impact of the actual construction.
That is the majority of it. Yes, sir.
So how do we get the impact of the stadium minus the construction?
So one of the things that
What I would consider lasting.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think you'll see as part of a younger analysis as it relates to the TIF, the broader TIF, not just the stadium, I would assume would have job numbers that are incorporated in that, in the same manner that you saw in the last project, if you will.
But this does have sales over the 30 years, right? Sales in the
It
30-year period.
It does, yes. And the sales tax component really was the most important. This is a little odd, but we basically have two different financial analyses. So one is the CSL study, which is what this is from, and it is particularly focused on sales tax revenue generated inside the stadium. And the reason we use CSL for that is because they are experts at working through kind of sports impact for economic impact for sports teams and sports development. The other is Younger and Associates, which is who did the economic impact analysis for the last project you guys just reviewed. And that is a broader impact of the full development of the site, if that makes sense.
So right now, the water is just a little bit muddy for us, is what you're saying.
Well, what I guess what I want to leave you with is this is only related to what happens inside the stadium, and what you will see for the broader site, the 140 acres or so, and the Younger analysis, which did the economic impact for that. And that allows the finance team here at the city to really understand what the tax increment financing looks like in terms of new property tax revenue generated. That's from the Younger analysis. That makes sense. Okay.
All right.
Sorry if I
Councilman
caused
Hill.
any confusion.
Hang on. Jermaine, take your finger off the button.
Okay.
All right. Councilman Henderson started touching on this, but I want to get just a little bit clearer answer.
Yep.
do any of the dollars we see, not specifically in the state, more the city county columns I'm looking at, are any of those overlapping dollars? Okay, so even though the city's in the county, the city may have higher dollars, but how do we know how much of that is like out of, I see 184 and a half and 181. If you take out the overlap, what is the actual
Well,
impact?
so inside the city, I want to be really clear. So how I say this, I apologize. That 95 million is the economic impact that is felt inside the city limits. That number for the county is what is felt inside the entire county. So the numbers are different because of the way money can flow, if that makes, I know that sounds strange.
I'm trying to grasp how inside the city is bigger than the county when the city's in the county, just like
Because
Councilman
it's-
Henderson was asking. But
Because it's new dollars that are spent. So some of that money inside the county. So what is that? $2.1 million. That difference, that's $2.1 million that would have already been spent somewhere else. So it just happens. So in that case, they're not counting that number. Does that make sense? So
Okay.
that's 2.1 million that would have been spent in Collegedale, let's say. But instead, because of the stadium, it's spent in the city of Chattanooga.
okay,
That's-
that helps.
Does
Thank
that
you.
help?
Yes.
And that's why the state number is so much even smaller than that, because that's money that is already being spent somewhere else. So Bradley County, Marion County, whatever. And so that's why that number is smaller.
Okay, thank you. That helps clear it up. Thank you, Charles.
Councilwoman Burrs.
Sorry.
Okay, for some of us that are a little slower here,
Yes.
Charles, this is a cost benefit analysis, right?
It's an economic impact analysis. I would not say it's cost benefit. So cost benefit would show you, here's how much you're spending. That's your cost.
I
And then
would
it would
love to see a cost. So what I'm hearing is cost benefit analysis talk.
Yeah.
Do you hear what I mean, we've worked on a lot. I'm hearing cost benefit explanations on this that makes no sense to me.
So, yeah, so this
All right,
is,
so I see what this is. If I'm going to make a decision, it's going to be a cost benefit analysis for what we spend, whatever that is. What's the benefit? And I believe what I hear you saying correctly is in the city, if we're spending 184 point, this is for the stadium only. That's number one, right? Okay. And we're spending 184.5 million.
no. That's direct. No, and sorry, that's where there's, okay, I understand why you're asking that
You
question.
see what I'm saying?
Yes, that's,
So talk to me in English.
I'm sorry.
All
So
right.
direct spending is the dollars that individuals are spending associated with the stadium. So
Yes.
correct. Yeah. It is not
Okay.
what the city and county are spending.
All
Yeah.
right, so revenue, okay. Oh, so this is direct revenue and total output is, talk to me what that means.
Sure. So that means some of that direct revenue, I'm going to use your term, gets respent over and over again, right? And so the way I would describe that is if someone who is a contractor that is hired to do work at the stadium, they spend money with someone else, right? Locally, whatever that is. They bought equipment and that money gets respent again. And so
Okay.
that's why that total output is higher, because the dollar moves in the economy. And so the way, typically when we're working on economic development projects, we want companies that are bringing in new money. When that new money comes in, it gets spent more than one time. right? So
Sure.
someone gets paid at the stadium, they take that money and then they go spend that money somewhere else.
All right.
So that's why that total output number is 303 million.
All right. And the jobs are associated with the stadium
Correct.
as it's built.
Correct.
All right. And we know that contractors come in because we probably don't have the contractors here to do it. Are they bringing in their people? So are they city jobs? Are
So
they people who live here
this-
right now?
This
Or
is
are
an
they bringing people in?
Sure. So this is just an economic analysis that's looking at the broader operation. It
Okay.
is not saying this is exactly how the operation is going to run.
Okay.
This is saying this is what it would take basically to construct the facility, if you
Okay.
will.
So what
How,
I
how
would,
it's done is not part of that. Plan.
okay, what I would really, really love is a cost benefit analysis.
And
What's it going to cost? What's the benefit?
and you should see some of that. I think you should see that with the younger.
It's on another slide.
It's coming up
Yes,
here.
ma'am.
I haven't seen it the whole presentation. Sorry.
Okay. Because I think I get what you're saying, and what I was hearing was cost benefit language associated to something that I was going, huh? So
Understood.
thank you very much for clearing it up.
Councilwoman Hill?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Will you please go back one slide? Thank you. So sports are not my thing.
Yes.
I'm always really clear about that. Also, I have come to the evaluation of this project with a completely open mind.
Sure.
I'm neither for nor against this project.
Yep.
Everything that you discussed about renewal of those neighborhoods, 100% for. Then we got to this slide and it started hitting me like, this is a lot of men's sports that are getting the government to pay for them a place to go play. And then I started thinking about when we had Pure Graphite here.
Yes.
I mean, I asked them, talk to me about the innovation that you are doing. Prove to me that you're going to be around.
Yes.
We wanted to make sure that they were economically viable, right?
Yes.
And just as we're talking and you're showing me economic impact and potentially that it would have, 150 jobs, including the folks that come in and build it,
Right.
but then residual. So who's going to work at this stadium, right? We're going to have peanut slingers.
Yep.
We're going to have AV people because it would be a multi-use facility. We're going to have concessions folks. We're going to have janitors. We're going to have baseball players.
Right.
So I just quickly, non-sports Jenny here, did some search about minor league baseball players because the one thing I know economically is they're not making bank, right?
Right.
So the numbers that I'm seeing is that a AA minor league baseball player can expect to make about $600 a week.
Right.
Now, I would expect that a $600 a week job for baseball probably is not a 52-week job.
Right.
But were it to be a 52-week job, before taxes, that would come to $31,200 annually. And when we start talking about the kind of jobs that we're looking to bring to Chattanooga that we know create sustainable livelihood for the people who live in Chattanooga, $31,000 annually is what, 30% AMI? We're talking about people who can't afford rent more than like $400 a month. Y'all, are we going to build that in this master development? Are there going to be places where the baseball players can actually afford to live? Huh?
I think that so here's how I would answer that. One, most teams do provide housing for their players. And so when you look at semi-professional teams, it is not uncommon for the owners to provide housing for players. But having said all of that, the bigger story here is not just about the stadium. And if I could sort of move through the slides to sort of tell the full story here, it is not just about the stadium, but it is about everything that can come around the stadium, just as I showed in Columbia, South Carolina.
I follow that, and I look forward to hearing that. And I know I have some more questions, but when I think about what star we hitch our wagon to in Chattanooga,
Right.
as a city council, as I mentioned before, like I want to mitigate risk while also taking advantage of opportunities.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, are sports a sustainable business? Because it looks to me like there are whole out like suburbs that have to be subsidized by the government to be able to have roads. And here I am looking at all these sports that the only way they get to have a place to play is for the government to pay for them. And I
Well-
don't get that, why we have that business model, and applaud it.
Sure. And I don't know that I would necessarily applaud the business model. What I would say is that this business model is one of the realities that exist in the United States of America. It is not it is not isolated to the city of Chattanooga. When you look back at how Finley Stadium was paid for, Finley Stadium was also largely publicly financed by both the city and the county. And so when we talk about what the potential revenue impact is of a stadium, you cannot look at the stadium in isolation and say, okay, what happens if we build a stadium and there's just going to be a stadium there? When we look at the overall economic development, we will look at the potential for all of the development that will come around it and what that development can do for our city. There is only one way for us to grow revenue, and that is to grow. And so as we look at how we use and how you take a site that is generating very few tax dollars to our economy, and you think about, okay, well, what can we do to bring new revenue into our city? The answer is development. I am a very pro-development guy. I will scream that till the day that I die. If you don't like that about me, then you don't like my style of economic development. But this is what we believe is going to help us to grow and to create more industry, more opportunity, more jobs, more places to live, and more entertainment for our city. This is how you create great public spaces. I didn't choose the business model, but I will say that the Lookouts will pay more than the Tennessee Titans will in Nashville, and we can show you that in the next few slides.
Okay. Keep on.
So at this point, I'll ask Brent to sort of come up to talk a little bit about the financing. And we want to say special thank you to the state legislative delegation. They were very instrumental in helping us to create a sales tax capture that allows us to capture sales taxes from all events within the stadium. So that's not just baseball games, it's also festivals, it's concerts. Because of the state delegation's help, we were able to capture that, which will be used as a revenue source for the stadium itself. We will have a competitive lease and parking fee structure with the Lookouts. And then, of course, we can create a TIF district to capture new property tax revenue. And so now I'll ask Brent to come up to talk a little bit about some of the breakdown here in the financing summary.
Thanks, Jermaine.
Brent, before you speak, Chair Penderson got another question. Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think what I would like to respond to Councilwoman Hill's question about, why we would do that. And I'm obviously taking an objective approach to this stadium. I don't think, and going back to your question, why would the government subsidize stadiums? And Jermaine hit on it a little bit about it being entertainment. I don't think it is unlike what we have done for years with the Tivoli. We've certainly subsidized the Tivoli in the name of the arts because of the benefit that it brings to Chattanoogans. And I think, most of us understand the saying as American as baseball and apple pie. Baseball is just in the fabric of our nation. And I think it is a draw. It was interesting to me that the mayor of Columbia, they didn't even have a professional, or they didn't have a professional baseball team in Columbia when they started talking about the stadium. They had to go out and find one to bring to Columbia. But they understood the draw that, and the benefit, I guess, that this particular type of entertainment would bring to a city. And I think it's just it's something I think that we will all have to come to terms to. Is that something that is a benefit to the citizens of Chattanooga to have a Major League Baseball team in Chattanooga? Just like, is it a benefit to have the Tivoli or the Memorial Auditorium, in the city of Chattanooga? And I think we'll all have to come to terms and answer that question for ourselves to determine whether this is worthy of government subsidy or not. All right, Jermaine, thanks.
All right. So I'll go through the financing plan that we're proposing. We will create a new sports authority that does not currently exist. It would be a jointly formed city and county sports authority. We do have a city sports authority, but because of the county's participation, we need to form a new sports authority that would have joint board appointments from the city and county. That sports authority would issue 30-year bonds, which is typical. This is the same structure that we see up the road in Knoxville. And then the debt service for those bonds would be paid from the property tax increment within the TIF district, sales taxes from the stadium, which Jermaine mentioned, the state legislature is allowing us to capture, the lease payments from the lookouts, which I'll talk about, parking revenues, as well as the local support. All of the TIF and sales tax estimates that we're using were provided by a third party, Younger Associates, who provides us with analysis for a lot of the economic development that we do throughout the city and the county. The lookouts would have a lease agreement that starts at $1 million per year. The Knoxville lease agreement has the same structure. It's $1 million a year for 30 years. The difference is we have an escalation in our agreement with the lookouts. So the lookouts would pay more than $30 million over 30 years, starting at $1 million with an escalator that's included. For parking, we negotiated a parking split. Typically at a lot of stadiums, most of the parking would go to the baseball team. But for this plan, we've negotiated 2 years where 100% of parking revenues go toward debt service. And then 2 years where 70% goes to debt service. And then for the remainder, it would be 50-50 through the end of the 30-year bond period. And then the city and the county would each put $1.5 million in this project. And I'll reiterate that on the next page. And that assumes $350 million of development around the stadium within the TIF. And as more development occurs, the amount that we have to cover declines. So this is a summary of what the numbers look like. This is all based on present value numbers or today's cost. So as an example, you'll see stadium lease there at $17.5 million. That is, the lookouts will pay more than $30 million over 30 years. But in terms of today's dollars, it's $17.5 million. And that's in order to keep everything based in today's dollars using discount rates that are the same as the bond rate. So the stadium construction cost would be $72 million. It could be a little more, it could be a little less. We don't, construction obviously goes up and down depending on what's happening. Capitalized interest would be $6.8 million. So what that is we are capitalizing interest on the front end of this bond so that we don't have to make any payments for the first 2 years, which would be the construction period. So while the stadium is being constructed, there would be no debt service payments on the bonds because we capitalize that as part of the bond issuance. And then we have bond issuance costs. Our total bond proceeds required is just under $80 million. And then the next section shows how we pay for this. So 63%. I'm going to go with the percentages. It's easier to look at. 63% of the cost of the stadium would be paid for by property tax increment within the TIF. This is based on $350 million development. We believe it's going to be higher than $350 million within the first few years, but we are being as conservative as possible. We think $350 million is a good number, especially since we already have about half of that committed. So 350 is a good number. Again, on the stadium lease, 22% of the stadium is being paid for by the lookouts. So the lookouts will have a lease agreement that requires them to pay rent. That rent will cover 22% of the debt service on the stadium. As Jermaine mentioned, that rent amount is about 3 times more than what the Tennessee Titans pay for a stadium in Nashville, which is also a stadium that gets $500 million from the state. It's also quite a bit more than what the Nashville Sounds pay for the minor league team in Nashville. I think Nashville pays around, or the Nashville Sounds pay around 750,000. We're starting at $1 million and increasing. 6% would come from sales tax generated in the stadium. That's the state portion, and that's the non-education portion of sales tax. So all of the educational portion of sales taxes, both state and local, go to the schools. All of the property taxes that are earmarked for education would still go to the schools, and we'll talk about that more. Parking revenues would be 4%. The city and county would each be putting $1.5 million in, or 2% of the cost, and then local sales tax would be 1%. And that is the total funding plan for debt service related to these bonds. So, what does it cost the city? In terms of today's dollars, it costs us $1.5 million. All of the increment that we're capturing for debt service doesn't currently exist, and we believe it would not exist without the stadium as a catalyst project for this site. The other thing I'll note is that not a penny of existing taxes go to pay for the stadium. I want to say that again, because there's been a lot of misinformation out there. Not a penny of existing taxes go toward the stadium. That $1.5 million that we would cover from the city would be through either hotel motel tax or economic development funds, or one of those types of funds. It's not going to come from anyone's property taxes that are being paid currently. The county's in the same boat. They'll use some other funds that's not property taxes. Next, I just want to mention the amount that would go to schools. So I mentioned, we're not waiving any taxes for schools, property nor sales tax. So $40 million would be generated over 30 years with just $350 million development. That's around $1.3 million a year of revenue for the schools that currently does not exist. We believe it will not exist without building a stadium, that it's a catalyst for the site. But the school board could use that for whatever they want to use it for: maintenance for school buildings, hire more teachers, whatever it is that the school board decides is the most pressing item. If we reach 500 million in development, then that number goes to $55 million in new revenues that goes to the school district over 30 years. I'll stop there and see if there's questions about the financing plan.
Just cause the board to light up like bingo. Councilman Henderson.
Brent, the lion's share of the bond repayment is through the incremental property tax. Is the 50 million based on 350 million of development?
Yes.
How much is committed so far?
I think, are you going to talk about that in a minute? But it's around 170 million. And Jermaine's going to talk about that more. And then, Jim Irwin is here as well to speak to some of the development.
So let me ask you this. This is, let's just call this is the somewhat best case scenario.
Worst case.
This is the numbers we're
Best
putting.
case would be $1 billion in development.
Okay, so this is middle case.
We think this is the minimum. We really believe this is minimal level.
This is where I'm going. Let's say we've got 170 million committed right now, but the economy goes south, and for whatever reason we go into a 6-7 year recession. Yeah. We don't get the tenants or the development that we think, and we stay at 170 million. Where do we make up? How do we make up the difference in the 50 or the 350 million that we thought we were going to get and the 170 million that we've got? That I'm assuming is a substantial difference in that $50 million of bond repayment.
Yeah. So we think 350 million is a good number, whether there's, we're in a bull market or a bear market. If we start hitting a recession, development still occurs. There's a lot of good stories out there about stadiums that have been built during, recessionary periods. Columbia is a good example. Columbia is up to 650 million development, and that part of that's even through the pandemic. So, we all know that development doesn't stop. If there's a Great Depression, then, we'll see what happens. But in a typical recessionary period, we would have probably used $500 million for the estimate. But because of possibly uncertain times, we decrease to 350 to see where we are. We think it's going to be closer to 500 million, but 350 is a good estimate. Just like everything we present to you all, this is all based on our best estimate. Every year when we present budgets, it's all estimates. Sales taxes that we collect are based on estimates. Property taxes are based on estimates. But what I have to do for my job is determine, what is the best information that we have currently and make the best possible estimate. It's my fiduciary responsibility to do so. And so that's what I've done here, just like I would do through a budget process.
So let me ask again, and if we go through a bad economy where we have low sales, we know that our property tax are pretty much going to hold steady, but we could see a decline in sales tax, tourism dollar, whatever. We have unreserved fund balance set aside for occasions that we can take out of.
We do.
And my question, where is the unreserved fund balance here? If we don't hit the 350 million in development, where does that come from?
If we don't hit the 350 million development, we would have to look at the entire structure and determine how to make up that difference in debt service payment. You're assuming the development completely stops, right? And we don't believe that will happen. Even if it slows down, there's still going to be revenue coming in. There's going to be increment coming. And this is all based on the fact that the stadium gets built. Once this is approved and ready to go, we get the stadium built.
Yes.
Even in a recession, they're still going to play baseball, and they're still going to generate sales tax and all that.
I get
right?
that. What I'm concerned
Development
about
around the stadium, even if it slows down, then the city and the county, if there was a gap in debt service, then the city and county have to contribute funds to pay for that. And that could come from all kinds of different sources.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this way. It is, if the economy slows down and we are experiencing less than the 350 in development. Now, I get what you're saying. Eventually, at some point in the future, we're going to hit 350. Is there, even a contingency of making this a 40-year bond note? In other words, once we're in the 30-year bond note, is that something that can be converted? Okay, we're not getting the revenue. Can we increase our time to decrease our payment? Just give me some scenarios to cover what happens, because we get those questions.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell them what I don't know, because that's not a good answer.
So we're talking about debt service. We're not talking about tens of millions of dollars a year in debt service, right? We're talking about, 2 to 3 million a year that's split between the city and the county if no other revenue is coming in. Okay. So if zero revenue comes in, then the city and the county has to split the debt service payment for that whole year. I just don't think that's going to happen.
So do we know?
Just
what
like
the-
I don't
do we know what
estimate
the-
that we're going to win the lottery.
Yeah.
I don't estimate that we're going to lose all revenue.
So what is the debt service per year on 80 million?
It's around, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I can send it to you.
Oh, okay.
Around 3 million a year.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brent, other concepts have been floated out there as to why we wouldn't approach a conventional financing tool. Can you explain, first of all, what we lose? And I think that I already know the answers, but I want to make sure that we understand why you would not do a conventional financing tool on this, and if you explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, a conventional financing model, it really isn't that feasible. I think, and the Lookouts ownership has said this. They said, if I could do a TIF and build a stadium, I would have already done it by now. Right. It's not, but that's not a private mechanism. It's a public only mechanism. And we're the only ones allowed to do it. To do a conventional construction financing for an $80 million stadium, first of all, it's going to be hard to get a loan for that amount of money regardless. Two, the interest rate is going to be at least double what the municipal or the sports authority interest rate would be. That increases the cost significantly to the tune of over $2 million a year in additional debt service, right? So that's a huge difference in the economics for the project, and it's not feasible, for the business model. The second item would be if it was a privately owned stadium, then we lose the sales tax recapture. So sales tax, the state legislation that allows us to capture sales tax, it's only allowed if it's a publicly owned stadium. So that would go away. That changes that eliminates a revenue stream to pay for the debt service, which is about over $12 million a year. I'm sorry, about $12 million total. It just goes away. And then lastly, if it's a privately owned stadium, then that's taxable real property, which also is a significant cost that would have to be absorbed, which again increases the cost to a level that makes it just not feasible. So for all those reasons, that's why on the slide that we looked at earlier, 18 of 19 stadiums built have some level of public funding. 14 of those, 80% plus of the stadium is public funding. And that's typical because of the way the economics work for the stadiums. So a public-private partnership is what makes this possible. 22% of the stadium is being paid for with private funds. And I think, that's something that keeps getting lost, but that's cold, hard cash that's coming to pay for the stadium, 22% of the stadium. The other thing I'll mention that I haven't talked about yet is the lease agreement will also require the Lookouts to pay approximately $1.5 million per year for maintenance of the stadium. They will have to maintain the stadium for 30 years throughout the lease agreement. $1.5 million a year for 30 years is $45 million, assuming zero cost increase, which we know that will continue to rise. So with the lease payments and the amount of money that the Lookouts will pay for maintenance, we're talking about at least $75 million in private funding over 30 years for this stadium.
You definitely hit on my second question, so I'll move on to my third. I was going to ask who's paying for the maintenance every year, and it's not taxpayers.
No, it'll be part of the lease agreement under contract that they'll be required to do it. The other thing that they'll have to do is they're going to have to put in upfront money inside the stadium for equipment to get the field in condition that's required by Major League Baseball, all of those things. So there is upfront investment for them that they have to put into the field, into the inside of the stadium. That's not included in here anywhere. That's just something they're responsible for as a team owner.
So my last question or point is, before I believe Mr. Irwin was assigned or signed on with this project, I should say, and I've done my research on his organization, and they do know what they're doing. I'm convinced of that. That's some remarkable project. But we had a commitment or an agreement for at least $150 million of development, I guess, ready to go. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that or tell us anything else about an agreement that's in place to ensure? Because even though this is focused on the stadium, I'm really kind of focused outside of the stadium because of the other 120 acres that are out there.
Yeah. And it might be, if there's other finance questions for me to answer, it might be good for me to do that now. And then, I think Jermaine and Mr. Irwin are going to do the rest of the presentation about the development as a whole.
All right, well, any questions, Councilman Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Brent, I'm going to take a slightly different angle to Councilman Henderson's question, because I think what we're hearing the most from concerned constituents, business people, anybody else, is really the what if scenario. So you've explained the 350, really think that's a low bar. Let's assume all that is correct. It wasn't too long ago that Major League Baseball was talking about dissolving some minor leagues. There was a lot of concern that we would lose the Lookouts. We didn't want to lose the Lookouts. So considering they're on the hook for 22% of this, what is the confidence, or what is the more backup plan conversations that, I can't be the only one that's bringing this question up, Brent. What happens if the Lookouts go away as a team? If MLB decides one day, hey, we don't need the Lookouts. Again, this is a real conversation that just happened not many years ago. So what are the thoughts there?
Yeah, and Jermaine may have something to add, but if that was, first of all, we're going to have a contract, right? The ownership group would be responsible to continue paying on the lease until such point they are not solvent to do so. again, this is an ownership group that owns two other teams. They're two of the top performing teams in all of minor league baseball. That, you know, they are very well respected by Major League Baseball. That's why we've gotten to the point where the reason the Lookouts were kind of saved from contraction, this is my understanding and paraphrasing, is because of the relationship they have with Major League Baseball. They are known as a really good ownership group, a good operator of stadiums, and they have, you know, great performing teams. That allowed us to get the extension to where we are now. But, you know, we are coming up on the end of the year again when we have to have a plan in place in order for them to meet the requirements of Major League Baseball. The stadium that we have now is no longer sufficient, and Major League Baseball is not going to allow teams to continue to play there. And that's the reality that we're facing. The vice president of player development for the Cincinnati Reds was on ESPN radio yesterday and talked about this very thing. You know, once we get to December, it's out of the hands of the Lookouts and it's out of the hands of the Reds. You know, we can't do anything else about it if we don't have something in place to present to them at that point. So, I just want to make sure to put that out there. But, you know, if something happened 10 years from now and Major League Baseball decided to get rid of the Lookouts, then, you know, we would rely on Charles to go find us a team to put in the stadium, you know, and we're designing the stadium in a way where it doesn't have to be baseball, right? It could be several other sports. The stadium's going to be used year round for things like concerts, all kinds of different gatherings. Mr. Irwin may be able to talk some about that because he was involved in other stadiums that have been built for this very purpose, for multi-purpose reasons. But that's what we'd have to do. If there is a point where the lease contract is no longer able to be serviced, you know, by their side, then we would have to find something else to substitute for that. And we would, you know, that's what we do here. We always make it work. We get there. If other things happen, like Chairman, or not Chairman, he's going to kill me. Councilman Henderson said, you know, we are using our best estimates. We're not planning on, you know, the sun to not come up tomorrow, but we're also not planning on, you know, striking it rich overnight. If sales taxes don't come in like we expected, then, you know, we'll keep working to increase development. If development's not happening, we'll increase activation in the stadium. You know, there are it's not, those numbers and those pots are not set in stone. That's based on today, what we think is going to happen. But obviously we would keep making sure that we are doing everything we can to generate the revenue that's needed to pay for these bonds with sources other than having to go into, you know, our fund balance. And like, there's all kinds of other options out there.
Okay, thanks, Brent. And that was an answer to question one. My second question you answered as well, which is, okay, we're really confident today, but who knows about 10 years down the road. And so the answer to question two is we're all relying on Charles Woods. Just want to make sure that that's clear, that
Yes.
there's just a little bit of pressure being put on
And
Charles
Jermaine.
sitting back there, and Jermaine. Good.
I just count the money.
All right. So in all seriousness, I appreciate that. And I understand that all we can do is project when we're talking about a project that could be a 30-year long project. It's a long time to think, will the Lookouts be here in 30 years? I mean, that's a long time. So I understand the questions that are
Yeah,
potentially coming in surrounding that. So having additional plans, at least thoughts of how those holes could be plugged should something like that happens, is definitely great to have. The other thing to point out is, you know, while many of us up here, I'll speak for myself, but I feel like it's probably a shared thought. They do have a lot of trust in you from the financial perspective, Brent. When you tell us about numbers and when you give us breakdowns, there is a level of trust there. But you won't be in this job that long, or even near that long. So, you know, there is concern moving forward on some of these. I really don't think you would choose to personally, but so thank you for giving that. And yeah, just to put out there, this is a long-term project, and the idea of having a vision and plans potentially way on down the road definitely helps.
Yeah. And you just remind me of a good point. One, thank you for the kind words, but a couple of points I'll make. One, these are 30-year bonds because it is the most conservative approach for us to take currently, right? Until development occurs, because it's the lowest debt service payment. However, once we get to 10 years, if we've hit the development goals, like if we've hit 500 million, 600 million, we will refinance. I mean, that is an option. And that's something I've already talked to our financial advisor about. We want to make sure we have as much flexibility as possible because we do believe development will get to a point where we could refinance and get all the stuff paid off sooner. But in order to be conservative and make sure that we're taking the very best approach, 30-year bonds is the best option here to make sure that we have the lowest debt payment in the early years. Again, it's the same structure that they're doing in Knoxville. And then the last thing I'll say is, the respect that the ownership group has goes a long way. So, the Hardball Capital owns Chattanooga Lookouts. They also own the team in Fort Wayne and the team in Columbia. They're consultants for building stadiums all over the country because they do it so well. I mean, they have a fantastic stadium in Fort Wayne that has over $1 billion in development. It's fundamentally changed the way their downtown operates. Columbia is, well on its way. It's up over 650 million in development. And again, that's through a pandemic and a recessionary period. But it's continued. They've also got a major headquarters, if you will, for a consulting firm, all kinds of other development around there. But their experience and the way they operate and the reputation that they have with the developers, as well as with Major League Baseball, that goes a long way for us to be very comfortable in what we're estimating here.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hill, do you have a finance question or, okay. Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you very much. Stadium lease 17.5. So it's a 30-year lease. Why is that not $30 million?
Yes, sorry. I think I said this right when you stepped out. These dollars are in today's dollars. So $1 million a year with an escalator over 30 years is the same as $17.5 million today. So all of this is expressed in today's dollars.
Just keeping it simple, huh?
That's the simplest way to do it. Otherwise,
All right,
we've got to
so they're
do
gonna
year
pay
by
him-
year for 30 years.
But there
So,
will be a payment every year for 30 years.
Yes. Yeah. And if you take $1 million a year with the escalator for 30 years and put it through, a calculator for present value at a discount rate that matches the bond, that's the number you get.
Okay, I trust you. AT&T Field opened in 2000, and you say it was funded with public money. I have not been able to.
No.
It was not.
No, Finley Stadium was partially
Finley
public.
Stadium was
Yes,
funded with public
AT&T
money.
Field was not.
Okay. So AT&T Field, it opened in 2000 and now is deemed irrelevant. I'm not one to pay for things on time that are not going to be worth anything by the time my term is over. You're not going to see me with a 10-year car payment. So a 30-year stadium payment, what's the lifespan expected to be of a stadium? Is this thing even going to be worth anything, even with regular maintenance every year at the end of 30 years?
That's a fantastic question. So I have two answers. One, AT&T Field was built as cheaply and small as possible to meet minimum requirements that were in place at the time. So, that footprint is very small. That's the reason the stadium faces the wrong direction, because it's the only way it worked on that footprint. And it, honestly, was just built as cheaply as they possibly could. But it did meet the requirements that were in place at the time. The requirements have only been changed by Major League Baseball twice in 100 years. And the second time was a couple years ago when they started the contraction of minor leagues. And the lifespan, or the life expectancy of the stadium, would be 50 years.
Okay.
And again, though, 30 years is most conservative for us currently, but we would aggressively seek to refinance that once we hit 10 years so that we could get it paid off as soon as possible.
Okay. $40 million in. Okay.
Like for us to keep our questions strictly pertaining to the project that's going to be happening, not AT&T Field or anything else. But we
This
got
has everything to do with
but
that.
we
Is that-
got to move on.
Okay,
I
we can
do
move on, but
apologize.
don't
Thank-
imply that my questions are
thank-
not inherent to our discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Brent, do you have any other finance questions for the slide? So, because we need to circle back around to Chairman's question.
Yeah, I do not. I think, yeah. I mean, Mr. Irwin traveled here today. I think it would be great if you all could hear from him about the development.
Okay, thank you.
So just to give you, and I'll try to move through this quickly. So right now, we are looking at a TIF process in which the county will be partnering with the city on how the application actually moves through the process. So there will be a public hearing, which is scheduled for July the 21st before the county's Industrial Development Board. On July the 27th, the County Commission would have an agenda session to discuss this during agenda. There would be a second public hearing before the City of Chattanooga's Industrial Development Board on August the 1st. And then on August the 3rd, the Hamilton County Commission would take a TIF vote as well as a vote to create a new joint sports authority. And again, that joint sports authority would be created because of both the support from both the city and county. Currently, we do have a sports authority, but that sports authority is a city body only. And then the city council would be looking at a vote and then a creation of a new joint sports authority around August the 9th. We believe, as I said before, that the opportunity is now. Again, although we care about the lookouts and we want the lookouts to continue to be here because the lookouts have been here for over 100 years. And we know that Major League Baseball has made it very clear to them that if they do not receive new facilities and if they don't receive a new stadium, they will pull them from the market and look to put them and to relocate them into other markets. However, our interest as a city is on the development that could come around the stadium, the development that the stadium will catalyze. And so we do have the commitment from Core Development for $160 million of multifamily housing. And then we have a world-renowned master developer named Jim Irwin, who is here today, who will be involved in the master planning and the master development of the site. And he believes that the site has the potential to leverage up to $1 billion of new development. This is the Ponce City market. This is in Atlanta. This is a masterful adaptive reuse of an abandoned warehouse in Atlanta. This is one of the projects that Mr. Irwin was involved in. This is one of the projects that he was instrumental in bringing to life and seeing the adaptive reuse to help revitalize Atlanta's Midtown. These are the types of structures that we should be able to see and that we should be able to have in the city of Chattanooga. We should be able to have this type of development, and Jim Irwin is the man who can bring it to us. And with that, I'll introduce Mr. Jim Irwin from New City Properties.
Thank you for that. That was incredible. I appreciate it. I'm truly honored to be here, and I'm here primarily to answer your questions. But before I do, I wanted to share a few anecdotes and thoughts. You've all asked some really, really good questions. Councilmember Hill, what I would say, you probably asked the most important question, in my opinion, and that is what's interesting to me about this opportunity is the convergence of all of these forces that we can't control, and that is this is an absolutely incredible city. It is at the nexus of many, many things that are happening in the world that make it an attractive place to live, an attractive place to have fun, to work, a lot of ways making Charles's job really, really easy. And that is, attracting companies here to actually be around catalytic projects. And that's really the theme of what I hope you hear today, is that this is not about baseball. This is about creating an amazing place for people. And these public projects like this and the convergence of a stadium and the Riverwalk, access to the river in this area, in an interesting place in the city, it is really like all of the planets have aligned in this perfect moment. And that's what was really interesting and compelling to me. And then you throw on top of it these beautiful structures that allow a really beautiful story to be told, because that's really, again, what my personal passion and what our company does really well. is take adaptive reuse buildings, old abandoned structures like the ones on the site, and save them, preserve them, tell compelling stories that are exciting and delightful and surprising. I love walking around Ponce City Market now that it's long been delivered to the city. And one of my absolute favorite things to see is like when a dad is like puts his arm around his daughter and points up at the building and talks about what it was used for. And literally like 90% of the time he's dead wrong, but it's still fun because it's like this amazing story about like the past, the present, the future of a city. And I think another thing that I would say is that your team here has done an incredible job of being shockingly conservative. $350 million on 120 acres of vacant land is shockingly conservative. That it's hard to overstate how conservative they've been. This all 120 acres will probably host 20 to 30, maybe even more unique, discrete projects in terms of just how much it fits. And what you've heard is one project that constitutes 170 million. And so just anecdotally, in just the calls that I've gotten from friends and colleagues in the development community since the initial news broke, I would say just in multifamily development alone, it would well exceed $350 million. So I think your city has done a very, very adequate job of being conservative in their projections. And again, anecdotally, the project that I'm working on now in Nashville and separately in Atlanta, those two alone are, one is about 20 acres, the other's 12, and each of those will be in excess of $1 billion. So, not that the density and height and the things like that are necessarily going to be justified in the immediate future in Chattanooga. Just think about the amount of land that's sitting here that is literally vacant. And Fort Wayne is another great example. I had the opportunity, my very, very first development project I ever worked on was working with Hardball Capital on the development of the Fort Wayne Stadium. And, that was essentially taking a ballpark and putting it right in the middle of the city in previously occupied areas. This is 120 acres of essentially vacant land. So you're starting from a really powerful position of economic development, and you're talking about a highly desirable location within the city where you have this emergence and this convergence of a lot of things that are attractive both for living, for companies that are looking to move to cities like this that have amazing access to the outdoors, where there's an amazing amount of diversity in the immediate area, and a place where you can build affordable housing, high-end housing, and things in the middle. So it's all of the planets are aligned in a really, really compelling way here. And so just as a observer of what we're talking about, I will tell you that this project is teed up better than just about any I've ever known. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah, you can kind of see the before and after of how we but part of what's exciting is to sort of toggle back and forth to really be able to use the structures in a really interesting way. It's really just not about 70 nights of baseball. It's about creating a year-round, really dynamic, compelling environment that people just love coming to. It's about concerts. It's about entertainment. It's about, again, housing. It's about, one of the things that really surprised me about the Fort Wayne Stadium anecdotally is that instead of building this big brick fortress that you think of psychologically with a ballpark that's closed except for when games are open, what we did there and what we would do here is actually sink the stadium down so that the concourse of the ballpark is actually integrated into the Riverwalk, and it's open year round. So it actually becomes a jogging track. It becomes a place that people can just come and hang out. And in Fort Wayne, I'll tell you that I was skeptical, but they said, we'll be able to keep one of the concession stand open year round. So in the middle of the winter, you can go get ballpark dogs and, all the things that you would get at a ballpark. And literally people walk from their office buildings, come get a hot dog or a hamburger and sit in the seats in a vacant stadium because of exactly the dynamic that you talked about. It's this sort of Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner ethos of like baseball is sort of so integral to our country. And that's, again, just one anecdote. But then you have road races and just all the community and culture and things that come from having this civic infrastructure. And it really catalyzes the type of development that you are all hoping to see in the city. And so that's the last thing I would add is that, we've been receiving a lot of questions about this. You should know that the development will come to the Foundry site, regardless of whether there's a stadium. But just please understand that the caliber and the size and volume and the catalytic nature of what is possible with the stadium, it vastly exceeds what's justified without it. And that's really the important thing to keep in mind as you're considering this. So with that, I'm of course happy to take any questions.
Chairman Lightfoot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Irwin, can you talk about the importance of having a master developer overseeing this project so that we can have more assurances in the quality of development, A, but B, that we adhere to what is promised to the community?
Of course. Yeah, it's a great question. So maybe just to talk about what the role of master developer is. So the partners that own the property, all 120 acres, what the arrangement that we've made, the business deal, is that the first step that I would take is to actually look at the entire 120 acre site and to study it in terms of infrastructure, transportation, what's justified in what locations. And that's part of the sort of art of what I do is sort of organize the site in a way that sort of casts a vision for when all 120 acres are complete. And what that means is, we'll literally create a picture of a street grid for the entire site. We'll say, low density housing is justified here. High-rise office is justified here. And then, and literally just sort of pencil out, almost like in terms of, imagine like a piece of graph paper where you're organizing and sort of projecting what will occur. That allows us to talk about building roads and infrastructure, talks about, what that allows me to do also is then to go, a lot of this obviously is interesting to our company too. We have interest in the vertically developing components ourselves. Obviously that's a huge part of what we do. But then also I'll be able to take that to other developers that I have a lot of respect for and actually recruit them to come so that multiple projects are happening at the same time. The other important thing in terms of protecting the quality, that obviously not only that's where our interests are aligned. One of the things that I care deeply about is preserving the quality, not just having cheap, things that will go away, And so what we'll do is create a document that is referred to in our business called CC&Rs, or covenants and restrictions, that set a minimum standard for architectural integrity and quality. It basically says what you must do and what you can't do. So for instance, what you can't do is build big, ugly, exposed parking decks and have them face the streets. And, it also specifies what kind of materials that you can use and really keeping the architectural integrity. And then it also it's almost like a lookbook to say, if you're going to build a home, it has to have these kind of details, not those and that. So there's a little bit of an art to allowing it to represent, diverse architecture, but, it's sort of like setting the minimum bar that, the stuff that really shouldn't be done is not allowed.
So as a master developer of your reputation, do you feel that you have a slight advantage acting as a magnet for some of the resources that we hope and investment that we hope to see in this site if we moved forward? And without your involvement, do you think that we would be at a disadvantage? Obviously, I'm putting you at a disadvantage to answer that question, but I'm trying to place for me the importance on having a not only reputable but world renowned. And I did do my homework on your outfit, New City Properties, and I just feel that's a really important part of this overall picture.
I think the most I appreciate the comment. I think the most straightforward way I would answer that question is that Gary Chazen and his partners were looking for a master developer that understood how to catalyze sites like theirs and do it in a way that left a lasting legacy that he and his family could be proud of. That's what Gary has said every single time we've met, is that he's had many opportunities to do lesser projects, but what he sees is an opportunity to create a transformative project for the city. And that is what is also interesting to me personally, and what we've developed experience in, or creating larger scale, epic nature projects that necessarily sort of explore the intersection of public and private investment. And that's, in Atlanta, it's the Beltline, in Nashville, it's the Greenway and the river, and, kind of creating these places where, it's not just a strip shopping center that, has a boring name, but it's a catalytic place where people can come and spend the day and everyone knows about.
Great. Thank you for answering the questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Burrs.
Thank you. I have a number of, not of you, sir. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Jermaine.
Yes.
And that was, it's like Dover Cole did the Bend, that sort of thing. And so I'm sure you're really good at what you do. I noticed you talked about Ponce Park, which was preserving. It looks to me like we're going to be tearing everything down here.
No.
It doesn't matter. Let me
Sure.
tell you, our time is short, and I saw a date of August 9th or something.
Yes.
Jermaine, I still don't have my cost benefit analysis. That's number one.
Yes, ma'am.
Number two, I have questions about gentrification.
Yes, ma'am.
Number three, I have questions about what does this do, if anything, and I don't need full answers now, of another publicly funded project that's Finley Stadium.
Yes.
Number four, you're talking about AT&T Park. Is all of that land owned by AT&T, or do we own the land underneath?
The Sports Authority.
What are
does.
we planning on doing for repurposing that? Can that help fund this? I have a lot of questions. I'm not against the project.
Sure.
I guess I'm an egghead when it comes to business, and where this all sounds wonderful and great, and the sales job has been great. My fiduciary responsibility is budget and money, and so that's where I'm coming from. And we've had some really good questions asked and some really pointed ones. I don't see now, and I'm only speaking for myself, that I'll be ready to vote pro or con, and I'd love to vote pro.
Sure.
In August, when I'm missing a lot of information that is sure it's going to develop. What about a recession? What about, I just heard a lot of certain level housing or to be there. What about gentrification? I mean, there's just all kinds of things. How does it benefit the entire city? Or is it just baseball people? A lot of it is based on year-round rental. Baseball is a very short season. What are you going to do the rest of the time? These aren't anti-questions.
Yep.
This is information I'm missing. So whereas this sounds wonderful and glorious and all of that, and I wish it all the best, I got a lot of questions.
And we have answers to all of those questions, which we can get to you this week.
Well, what I would like to do is have it all publicly.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I'd like it all on record, because I have constituents that not that it's not, people aren't against it.
Yeah.
They want information. So, Mr. Chair, another thing, I would like information that's given to us not to be on record, public, so that the public can understand exactly why we're making the decisions we're making. There was a little bit of information. You were talking about the city's only putting in some 1.5 million or whatever.
Yes, ma'am.
And yet our economic development fund is comes from city taxes, doesn't it? So we're really putting in more than that. So all I want to know is I want time for us to talk to you and get the kind of answers on record. So when constituents ask the big questions, we can refer them to the recording or the whatever, or our minutes.
Yes, ma'am. We will.
Does that make sense?
100%.
That's all I'm saying.
Yes, ma'am. It's a big, complex project. So
Yes.
yes, absolutely. We will also put all of the information that we share with you on the website for the project, which is southbroad.info. So southbroad.info, we will also is a public, that website is already up today. So everything that we tell you will also go to the website. But yes, we can get you all of that
That's cool.
information.
There's more esoteric things like the gentrification, like
Yes,
the
ma'am.
different things like that, that I think there are answers for. I just like them on record.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Dudley.
Yes, I think it just incumbent upon me to speak about this since it is in District 7. Initially, when hearing about this project, I was not a fan of it because I don't believe putting public dollars into private projects like this are important. I think those dollars could be used elsewhere. However, after looking at the development around it and how it really can impact historically underinvested communities, that is key and important here. So as much as we want to, or as much as, people say stadium, that's not what this is about. It is about the development of the Willen Foundry U.S. Pipe site and the economic impact it can have, not just at that site and for the city, but also for those surrounding communities. I do want to commend Jermaine and my committee chair, Tamara Stewart, who have been with me as I've been giving this information out and speaking to members of the community who are majorly in support of this project. In addition, there's a small community that's going to be right next to the stadium. I was excited to see them included as well. Mountain View neighborhood, very overlooked community. So I'm excited to see where this project goes. I believe the development around it is going to be truly impactful for those communities. In addition, we are working on a community advisory committee just for this stadium that will include residents from that surrounding area. So they will have input and say in what is going on. We know that moving down the line, it's going to impact property taxes, it's going to impact all those different things. And so those are topics that were brought up during our community meeting. So we will continue to move forward with those conversations with the community. So it's not an isolated project, but it becomes a community project.
Yes,
That as I have community members actually watching right now, they're texting me and saying support that, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I did want to just express my support for it, express it because I know there is going to be more community involvement with it. It is, of course, in the Great District 7, and again, I'm not typically one for public funds into anything private, but this is a win-win, I believe. But I know my colleagues have a lot of questions and they have constituents as well, because it's not just one district. There are 9 of us, and so they need to be able to answer those questions with clarity and with confidence to their constituents to ensure that they not only they understand, but their constituents understand as well. So I appreciate all your questions and everything, and I do hope we will be able to have a second session to go over this information again and answer any other questions anyone may have in regards to this issue.
Yes, ma'am. And we made the commitment when we first met with the faith leaders in the South Chattanooga Neighborhood Association that we would continue ongoing meetings with them to make them a part of this project. We stand by that commitment, and we certainly agreed to work with the community advisory group. So I look forward to continuing to meet with them. The one thing that I would also add is to the point that you made, this is not about baseball. We made it very clear to the property owners that if he wasn't involved, we weren't going to be involved. So that was the commitment from the city, was that we wanted there to be a master developer who could oversee and generate all of that additional economic development, because that's what we care about. The lookouts are great, but we care about the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairwoman. Great words. And Chairman Lefford, if we can get placed back on the agenda for another committee meeting to further discuss this. And it's the last question. Yeah, I see. Last question, Councilman Henderson.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, we do have a vote on the 26th that basically sends it to the IDB, and I think it would be good to have this meeting at least on or prior to the 19th, if that works for Mr. Freeman. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
To have all these answers, and I think there's probably other questions that, we have a lot of questions that need answered, and we're
Right.
trying to just, kind of shoot them off. I do have a question for Mr. Irwin.
Sure, Mr. Irwin. And I think that Charles wanted to say one more thing.
Since he was here. And I noticed, I have a great love for preserving some of our older buildings in the city. And that's one of the things that we did a great job in the revitalization of downtown. Is this one building the only one, I guess, that's going to remain from the site currently?
No, the intent is to maintain as much as humanly possible.
Okay.
If you look in the background, the left field, that was a watercolors attempt to illustrate that,
Okay.
both buildings.
Oh, great. My next question, I noticed, Jermaine, the TIF extends to the west side of the freeway, which touches the river.
Yes.
In the development, are we going to take advantage? You can drive to Knoxville and you can go to Neyland Stadium by docking your boat. Are we going to take advantage of the riverfront by being able to dock your boat and go to Lookouts game?
That is a better question for him, but what we included.
That's the reason I was asking.
Yeah, okay. But we included that parcel because it was part of the South Broad Master Plan that was adopted by the City Council in 2018. But James,
We are actively engaged in Nashville right now, getting a mooring permit with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Coast Guard on the Cumberland River in Nashville.
So it is. So it's possible maybe to have some docks there and make it accessible from the river or through boat to the stadium.
It's a brilliant idea.
I mean, I think it would be phenomenal to.
Absolutely. We would absolutely pursue that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If I could, one of the issues that's come up, I think, a few times now is around the timing for this. And I think what I would want to make sure gets communicated is that to be the most financially conservative as a community, creating the TIF district as soon as possible so that we do not miss out on potential increment that gets created by core and other ancillary developments on or around the site is going to make sure that we've got revenue coming into the tax increment financing district as fast as possible. And so that I do want to really make clear when we look at timing, there's a few things, there's a confluence of events that have happened, not the least of which is state legislature provided support for the project. The owners have entered into an agreement with Mr. Irwin, but from a financial standpoint, as you saw, a pretty significant portion of this is funded through tax increment financing. And so the sooner that TIF gets created, the sooner increment can go into that TIF fund. And so that's one of the risks. If we look at delaying, do we miss potential tax increment that goes in? And so I would really, as you have folks who ask you about that, if regardless of whether you're funding a stadium or not, if you're going to use a TIF, timing wise, you want to start that clock ticking, ideally when you have development kind of going into it pretty quickly. So I hope that's helpful as you have questions around that.
objections to a specially called Economic Development Committee meeting on July 19th?
No, no objections.
Okay, we will have a specially called meeting on July 19th, Economic Development Part 2.
Yes.
Part two, I look forward to it.
Madam Clerk?
Is that it? Thank you. We're adjourned to 6. That's our fault.